It's the SNL Hall of Fame podcast with your host, Jamie Dew, Chief Librarian Thomas Senna, and featuring Matt Ardill. And now, curator of the hall, Jamie Dew.
All right. Thank you so much, Doug DeNant. It's great to be here again with you all in the SNL Hall of Fame. Before we get too serious here, I'm going to ask you to please wipe your feet before entering the hall. This is a dignified place, and there's no room for muck on your shoes. The SNL Hall of Fame podcast is a weekly affair. Each episode, we take a deep dive into the career of a former cast member, host, musical guest, or writer, and add them to the ballot for your consideration. Once the nominees have been announced, we turn to you, the listener, to vote for the most deserving and help determine who will be enshrined for perpetuity in the hall. That's what we do here. It's real simple. The game is quite easy. You listen to the show, we nominate the guests, and then you vote on it. And Bob's your uncle, especially if Bob's your uncle. Let's go right now to our feature player, Matt Ardill, who is hosting Matt's Minutia Minute. Matt, how you doing, my friend?
Hey, Jamie. Thanks for having me today.
It is my pleasure. I am always interested in what's going on in Matt's Minutia Minute.
Yeah, today we are talking about Robert Smigel, 5'11", born February 7th, 1960, writer and featured player. So he's done it all. He has 44 writer credits, 27 producer credits, 64 acting credits ranging from the Dana Carvey Show to Bob's Burgers. His father was actually the dentist who popularized tooth bonding. So, came from a different background than many comedy writers, but honestly, the son of a dentist is the perfect background for a comedy writer. Yeah. He dropped out of Cornell's pre-dental program to pursue writing and performing, later graduating from NYU in 1983. And he was in the Chicago improv troupe that he co-founded with Bob Odenkirk called All You Can Eat. Now, one of his many famous characters is Triumph the Insult Comic Dog.
Yeah.
And in 2000, he was sued by Pets.com for insulting their pet sock puppet mascot. He got away from that. That was a fine. But he's collaborated on a lot of characters with people. He's worked with Adam Sandler in Billy Madison, Happy Gilmore, The Wedding Singer, Little Nicky, Punch Drunk Love, and I Now Pronounce You Chuck and Larry. And in Little Nicky, he portrayed the voice of Beefy, the dog. Now, he has dedicated a lot of his life to autism charity. He served on the board of Next for Autism, providing services to families and to autistic people throughout New York. He created the Night of Too Many Stars charity drive for autism. And most recently, the most recent bit of trivia is he was once again in trouble with Triumph as he was arrested in the Longhouse office building, which is part of the Senate buildings in Washington, D.C., when filming a segment for The Late Show. The charges were dismissed despite Tucker Carlson saying it was an insurrection. So, he just keeps getting in trouble, but he keeps doing good. So he's a really great guy.
Awesome. Well, I look forward to hearing what Thomas and his special guest, Bill Kenney, have to say about Mr. Smigel. So let's go to that right now. Thanks so much, Matt. We'll go downstairs to Thomas and Bill Kenney and get a sense of what everything's all about. Take it away, Thomas.
right, Jamie and Matt, thank you so much. And I am joined here by 1/4 of the Superfans on the Saturday Night Network, Mr. Bill Kenney himself. Bill, how are you tonight?
I'm great, Thomas. Thanks for having me back. Super excited to talk about Mr. Smigel.
Yeah, I'm really excited to have you. Before we get into Robert Smigel, though, we have some SNL Hall of Fame business from season 2 that we kind of should hash out here for a couple minutes. So I wanted to get your thoughts on this. So you were on in season 2. I think we made a great case for Jan Hooks. That was the person who you talked about.
Yeah.
I know you're super passionate about Jan Hooks. That's why I asked you specifically to be on the Jan Hooks episode. Jan Hooks received 39.8% of the vote in her first go-around on the ballot. You need 66.6% to be on the ballot. So, Bill, would you like to say anything to the voters about this unspeakable mistake?
Oh, the recency bias that happens if it's not like a megawatt movie star like a Mike Myers or, something along that nature, or somebody who's kind of gone through the whole, still is relevant today, like a Belushi or an Aykroyd. Go back and watch some of these Jan Hooks. That not everything's on YouTube, but a decent enough amount is. If you're an SNL fan, you should definitely search her out. The things that Thomas and I talked about in the episode, like Betty Davis, Sweeney Sisters, if you look hard enough. She's so worthy. And if you love people like Kate McKinnon and Tina Fey and Kristen Wiig, this is where it all started. So please do yourself a favor and get her in for season 3.
Yes, Bill's being very nice. He even said please to you all. So, looking at the voting here, out of the people who didn't make it, there's 2 cast members in front of her who did not make it. That would be Maya Rudolph, who had almost 58% of the vote, and Molly Shannon had a little over 47%. So those are the 2 cast members who didn't make it, who might be in line ahead of Jan for this next cycle. But I will say, I think season 3 might be there's maybe less heavy hitters in season 3. I think it's more interesting in that way. It feels like more of a toss-up that we have going on. So maybe Jan could vault up the ballots for a lot of people, since we cleared out the Kristen Wiggs and Bill Haders and Will Ferrells of the world. Maybe this could be Jan's opportunity.
Well, as we always like to bring it back to sports, the Baseball Hall of Fame is one of those things where some years it's so top heavy and there's so many people that are first ballot Hall of Famers, and you can't get in the people who are obviously deserving as well. And, with baseball this year, I've seen Fred McGriff get in, who is way overdue. And he just kind of got overlooked for so many years because there were so many bigger names in front of him. So, yeah, I think you're right. I think there's a great potential to make the case for Jan this year.
You know what? And Fred McGriff getting in, there's that Atlanta connection. Jan being from Atlanta, I know she was
Bingo.
a Braves fan. Fred McGriff spent a lot of time with the Braves, so you can maybe have that connection, a little synergy right there.
That's right.
We're rooting for Jan, is all we can say. For sure. So today we are talking about the great Robert Smigel. He's nominated for the SNL Hall of Fame as a writer. So I'm super excited about this. And Bill, I'm wondering, so just generally speaking, and we'll get into details obviously throughout the episode, but what is it generally about Robert Smigel that compelled you to want to talk about him?
Well, as I stated on the Jan Hooks episode, this is the beginning of my fandom. When season 12 starts, Robert Smigel comes in season 11, and so he's a big part of what I loved about the show in my formative SNL years. And it's such an important part. The writers don't get enough love, as we've seen as well. And it's so important to have those great writers, that people talk about the terrible season 20, and you had people like Farley and Sandler. The writing wasn't there. So you have to have both of these huge pieces, and Robert was a big, big part of that in that era, that second golden era, as we call it.
Yeah, definitely a distinct voice. I know, especially from around that time period, this has been a theme here on the SNL Hall of Fame when discussing writers, is we have access nowadays to everything that the current writers have written. Like, we get that information minutes, it seems like, a couple hours after each episode, right?
We'll be on the Saturday Night Network Hot Take Show, and John Schneider will talk about the writing credits. He'll have it 10 minutes after the show.
Yeah, exactly. And I wish we had that kind of information for the writers, and all the way dating back to 75 and on. I mean, what a wealth of information that is, and it gives you such a better perspective of what happens at the show. With all that said, though, I think Robert Smigel does have his distinct voice. I think I can watch a sketch. Definitely, things like TV Funhouse and everything. He has his distinct voice. So he was somebody from that era, his era being the 80s and 90s, and actually all the way stretching through the mid 2000s. Definitely a distinct voice, Robert Smigel. So super pumped for this episode. So happy to talk about him.
Same.
So his background, I couldn't find much about his background. I know he's from Chicago. He studied improv at the Players Workshop. I guess around that time, SNL was littered with like the Harvard types, had a few groundlings, but Chicago was definitely a wealth of talent around that time.
Definitely. And one of the reasons that he got discovered, he had made his own comedy review in Chicago called All You Can Eat. And some people who went on to various portions of fame, Jill Talley was a part of it, who went on to marry Tom Kenny, famous for SpongeBob, and she's been in a lot of comedy things. So she was part of that review as well. And Franken and Davis were in Chicago kind of hunting for someone else and came upon this, and they had just returned to the show with Lorne, getting ready for season 11, and saw Smigel and had to tell Lorne about it.
Of course, Bob Odenkirk came up with Smigel through actually that Players Workshop as well. So I can imagine two minds like Odenkirk and Smigel kind of rubbing off on each other, and that must have been such a great time to be around the Players Workshop around that time.
I mean, with baseball, you always say, you go to a minor league game and you see these people kind of, diamonds in the rough. And could you imagine having been in Chicago in the 80s and being a comedy nerd and going to these things and finding out later that, oh yeah, Odenkirk and Smigel, like, it's just such an amazing thing to be on the ground floor of something like that.
Oh, I couldn't imagine, like, just seeing comedy. I'm a Bears fan, so seeing comedy, watching the Bears dominate certain stretches of the 80s, eating deep dish, like Chicago in the 80s, man. Maybe running across Ferris Bueller at a parade or something. But the Chicago in the 80s sounds fun.
Yes, I'm in.
Sure. I'm in too, yes. So, as you had mentioned, Robert Schmeigel's first season at SNL was season 11. That was in 85-86, the first season that Lorne Michaels returned to the show. So, we had recently talked about Dick Ebersol, and we referred to season 10 as Ebersol's Steinbrenner season. I think season 11 was kind of Lorne's Steinbrenner year, in which he just sort of hired ringers and everything like that. We talked about season 11 a little bit when we talked about Jan Hooks, and we know that the network and Lorne did a lot of cleaning house after season 11. Interesting that Smigel was one of the handful of survivors from season 11.
He's not only one of the survivors, but he wrote the infamous fire sketch that ended season 11.
Did he?
Yes. And he... Could you imagine being a writer on the show that was clearly struggling, and Lorne comes up to you and says, listen, this is what we need to do. I can't give you too many spoilers, but I'm going to go and giving him kind of the groundwork to make this sketch and if you don't remember this sketch, it basically was based on a parody of the primetime soap operas of the time, the Dallases and the Dynasties, where they would end their season with this, tragedy where everybody was stuck in a gunfight or a fire, and they had put all of the cast in this one room. Billy Martin, of all people, hosting the show, sets fire to this room, And Lauren comes down and confronts Billy Martin and then goes into the room, pulls Lovitz out, and leaves everybody else to die.
Yes. I wonder if Smigel had an inkling that he was returning when he wrote that sketch.
You wonder. I think that would make me feel better. If my boss comes up to me and tells me what he wants me to do for this, yeah, but I don't know that anybody felt safe. I don't know that anybody knew that the show was even going to come back. It was one of the few times that the show came back that they weren't given a full season extension. So
very interesting time there in SNL history, and Robert Smigel right in the thick of things. So are there any sketches? We'll dive into the sketches right here. So are there any sketches in those early years that really stand out to you, Bill?
Well, the only thing really besides the fire sketch in that first season is the El Spectacular de Marica. And if I butchered that, I apologize. Spanish is not my forte. But this was in his very first episode in season 11. Madonna hosted. And the entire thing is set as a Spanish game show.
Marica, este programa el noche es muy especial, ¿no?
Oh, sí.
Señorita Marica. Oh, es el pato loco.
Es el pato loco. Es el pato loquísimo. ¿Quién es? ¿Quién es? ¿Por qué quién?
Porque Pip.
Es el pato loco.
And almost the entire sketch is in Spanish. And they just keep piling on these stranger and stranger things, singing American songs in Spanish versions. And I think Randy Quaid comes out as St. Louis Cardinals pitcher Joaquin Andahar.
That's right. Yep. Yeah. Which who better to play Joaquin Andahar than Randy Quaid, right?
Deep cut upon deep cut. Yes, that is. So that was really the standout, and he had that in his very first episode. But then, obviously, when we get into season 12, this is when it really starts cooking.
One of the sketches from season 12 that really stands out to me, and we can kind of volley here a little bit, and probably something that stood out to you is the Star Trek convention.
Oh, yes.
And that was episode 8 of season 12. Maybe one of the first sketches of his that possibly resonated in a big way with people. That was one of my favorite sketches when I was a kid, and really that was Schmeigel's voice, his kind of biting humor, his satirical humor. Tell me your thoughts on that Star Trek convention sketch.
Well, again, this is the season that I fall in love with the show. And all of these people who are on the show, Dana and Jan and Phil, brilliant actors, comedians. But the writing that goes into this, I mean, the Star Trek convention with Shatner standing up there and berating these poor nerds.
You know, before I answer any more questions, there's something I wanted to say. I having received all your letters over the years, and I've spoken to many of you, and some of you have traveled, hundreds of miles to be here, I'd just like to say, get a life, will you, people? I mean, for crying out loud, it's just a TV show. I mean, look at you. Look at the way you're dressed. You've turned an enjoyable little job that I did as a lark for a few years into a colossal waste of time. I mean, how old are you people? What have you done with yourselves? You must be almost 30. Have you ever kissed a girl?
It's funny to look back on that as far as conventions, too. This was really the beginning of conventions. Now there's a con every other week and for everything that you could possibly imagine. Star Trek was really the first of those. And I think they started in the 70s. And by the 80s, they had kind of picked up a little steam. But, it's in a banquet room. Like, that would never happen today. Now they're in convention centers. But the passion of these people and mentioning episodes way before, now we sit here and talk about season 12, episode 8, for them to go, well, season or episode 25, you talk about, and Shatner's trying to answer these questions that he has no memory of. And eventually he snaps and goes off on them. Phil Hartman confronts him off stage, and it goes from there, and he apologizes in only a way that Shatner can. But yeah, this is one of the first times that we see Robert's distinct voice on the show.
Yeah, that was such a beautiful commentary on fandom, because you have these Star Trek, these Trekkies who, like you said, know every episode by name and number, and they ask Shatner these questions, and they figure, we're big fans, he must be a bigger fan than me because he was in the show. But Shatner almost, it comes across as just like, I was just in the show. I don't know as much as you guys do, but so it's kind of funny, just kind of that commentary on fandom, how and that might, for SNL fans, for all I know, I immerse myself more in the show than maybe somebody like Adam Sandler does. And Adam Sandler was on the show, but we might know more about SNL history than a lot of the cast members. So they might react to us in the same way. But it was just a fun commentary on fandom for me.
Yes. And the other one from that time frame, that early season 12, is the Reagan Mastermind.
That was Smigel.
That was Smigel.
Oh, my gosh.
Yes. I was telling Thomas off air, and I'll mention it here, that I did reach out to Robert Smigel on Twitter, and he was very, very kind because, some of these sketches have been lost to time, as Thomas said, not knowing who wrote them or who had a hand in every single thing. And he was able to shed a lot of light on what he had a part of, and it just kind of reinforced how much I love his work, because there's not only are these very funny sketches, but he is really the king of catchphrases. I think about all of the catchphrases that I had from this time of my life, and they're almost always a Smigel sketch, and it kind of just reinforced that. But yes, he confirmed that the Reagan Mastermind, I was huge into politics even at that early age. I was a nerd with this stuff. So Reagan was known as kind of a doddering fool at this point in his career, not remembering things. And so the sketch starts off, I think it's the first time Phil Hartman plays Reagan, if I remember correctly.
Yes.
And he, is just kind of doddering around. And then as soon as it's just him and his associates, he becomes this brilliant kind of dictator-like, explaining every single thing about wars and things like that.
Carlucci, you're new. Here's how we do things. The red countries are the countries we sell arms to. The green countries are the countries where we wash our money.
And then it'll cut to another scene, and a Girl Scout's coming in, and he has to, shake her hand and thank her for coming in, and he's talking in his Reagan-esque voice.
Well, hello, little girl. What's your name?
Lisa Myers.
Well, Lisa, if you're that good a sales lady, maybe I could use you up on Capitol Hill. Well, it was nice meeting you.
Come on, Lisa. Come on.
Bye-bye.
Back to work!
It's just such brilliance. You always associate the political stuff from that era with Downey and Franken. But no, it wasn't just.
Yeah, gosh. So that Reagan sketch, the Reagan Mastermind sketch, I would put that on the short list along with like the 88 debate cold open and probably the Clinton at McDonald's sketch, as far as like the short list of my favorite political sketches in the show's history. So I'm thrilled that Smigel himself told you that he was behind that sketch. And by the way, Bill, great job of getting this cheat code as far as research goes. just get it from the man himself. That's A for effort right there.
I threw a half-court shot just to see what would happen, and he did not disappoint. Very, very generous man.
Yeah. He's always seemed like a nice dude. I've heard him in interviews over the last few years, and he seems like a pretty down-to-earth, sharp kind of guy. So that's awesome. You just threw a wonderful nugget at me that Schmeigel's behind like one of my favorite sketches from that era. That's amazing.
I may have more.
Yeah. Feel free. No. What's another one you want to highlight?
Well, from that time, he also wrote this blew my mind. I did not know this. The Steve Martin Christmas Wish was him.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So first 9 or 10 episodes of season 12, you've got Reagan Mastermind, Trekkie Convention, and Steve Martin's Christmas Wish. All three of which are still in the zeitgeist in some form or another. And to know that he wrote that, probably what Steve is, well, maybe not the most famous thing, obviously King Tut, but it's up there.
We see it get played on holiday compilation episodes.
Right.
The COVID episode that Paul Rudd hosted. Lauren asked Paul Rudd, are there any Christmas or holiday themed sketches that you love? And Paul Rudd mentioned the Steve Martin Christmas Wish monologue or sketch immediately. So that's why we saw that on the show, and even on that COVID show.
Well, with the new Christmas compilations that they put on TV, I've kept my DVDs from the early 2000s because there's such a recency bias with SNL where they'll just show the last 10 years of Christmas sketches. But the only thing that's made it out of that era in its full form is the Steve Martin Christmas list.
You know, if I had 3 wishes that I could make this holiday season, the first, of course, would be for all the children to get together and sing. The second would be for the $30 million every month to me. And the third would be for all-encompassing power over every living being and the entire universe. And if I had 4 wishes that I could make this holiday season, the first would be the crap about the kids. The second would be for the 30 million, the third would be for all the power, and the fourth would be to set aside 1 month each year to have an extended 31-day orgasm.
It's probably the oldest thing from SNL that they put on their network version of the Christmas show.
Yeah, geez. So we found out, or I found out, that Smigel had a hand or a huge part or whatever in the Reagan Mastermind sketch, which is a classic, and the Steve Martin Christmas wish list sketch, which is in Stone Cold classic. Oh my gosh. See, this is why, we should make it just a standard part of the show to try to reach out to these people and ask them what they did before every show.
I can't imagine everyone being as kind as he was, but yes, that would be a nice prerequisite.
That's awesome. Gosh. Is there anything else that stood out?
Well, from that time, there was also, he said that he gives credit more to Conan, but he helped with the Girl Watchers with Tom Hanks and Lovitz. So he was a part of that famous sketch as well.
That was a recurring character for one of the great hosts in SNL history, an SNL Hall of Famer in Tom Hanks. That's awesome.
But then we get into season 13, and it's really season 13 and 14 to me. I will put those 2 seasons up against anything in the history of the show. You can obviously make the point for other seasons, and everybody has their favorites, everybody has their favorite cast, but I think this is really when the wheels start turning, and Smigel is joined by all of these people who became famous later on. Greg Daniels, Conan, Odenkirk, Jack Handy, A. Whitney Brown is there. Obviously, he's been there a while. And then they have the old guard in Franken Davis and Rosie Schuster and Downey. I mean, this is a murderer's row of writers to go along with this incredible cast.
Yeah,
so,
it's unreal. And that was basically 1987 through 89.
Right.
So they're on the tail end of the 80s. That's what an unreal writer's room that is. And I can imagine being in that environment and just seeing them feed off each other and do bits in the office, and maybe that'll turn into a sketch, and maybe they're just doing it to avoid writing a sketch. But well, what a fun environment that must have been.
Not to quote another podcast, but to be a fly on the wall.
Oh, no kidding. Oh my gosh. We'll probably jump around as far as chronology goes here for the early days, but I recently found out, actually through his appearance on the Fly on the Wall podcast, that he was behind the Schmitz Gay commercial.
Yes.
Which was wonderful. I think on the surface, it just seems like it's a silly thing that Sandler and Farley did, but typical Smigel and his voice, that was a hilarious parody of a sexist beer commercial that we tended to see around that time, and we used to watch any NFL game from the early 90s and you would see scantily clad women emerging from pools with a Bud Light in hand, or somebody watching her with a Bud Light in hand or something like that. So Smigel, being the master at satire and parody that he is, wrote the Schmidt's Gay commercial, which was Sandler and Farley. It's Sandler who's house sitting, and so he shows Farley the pool, and it looks awful, but then he turns the knob and the water goes into the pool, and all of a sudden you hear this Van Halen music, and you would think as a viewer around that time that you would see women in bikinis, but what comes out of the water? Men in Speedos, muscly men in Speedos, and Sandler and Farley look at each other and go, yes, they're so excited. And then they have this wonderful time with all these men, which I thought was a brilliant parody on Schmeigel's part.
This is the great house-sitting deal that you found. This place is a dump. Just wait till you see the pool. No water? Like you need to get wet. Thank you.
To put something like that on TV, even in the 11:30 slot in 1989 or 90, is crazy.
Yeah, I wonder how Michael Jordan felt about that, because he was the host for that episode.
Was it that late?
Yeah, so it was in 91. Yeah, and that was the Michael Jordan hosted episode. So I always thought it was kind of funny that aired when Michael Jordan, who was this, he portrayed a clean-cut kind of image around that time. I always thought that was a really funny pairing.
And he mentions on Fly on the Wall that he wanted Kevin and Dana, right? I think that's what he said.
Initially, yeah.
He had an idea, or maybe it was one of the older cast members. And at the last minute, he decided, no, it'll be funnier with these young, hipper guys. And he's right. I can't imagine it with anybody else.
No, it was perfect. And then, of course, I think it was Phil Hartman who did the voiceover, as he almost always did around that time.
If you've got a big thirst and you're gay, reach for a cold tall bottle of Schmidt's Gay.
So that was one of my favorite Smigel penned sketches from his early stint at SNL. Did he give you any other nuggets?
Well, he spent a lot of time working with Dana, and obviously that comes up later when they both leave the show and make the very underrated Dana Carvey show. But a lot of the stuff that is most famous is Dana pairings with other people and Smigel writing it. So you've got the McLaughlin Group, which is one of my favorites. Mm-hmm. They also did an offshoot of that, the Sinatra Group, which is Phil playing Sinatra with Sinead O'Connor and Sting as Billy Idol. But the McLaughlin Group really strikes me as funny because we talk about this even today. How far back can you go? If you do stuff from the 70s or the 80s, are the kids today going to get it? Is it funny enough? Well, this was a current show at the time, but nobody under 80 was watching the McLaughlin Group. I mean, this was a Sunday morning show with this crusty old man. And they had us kids quoting this every week, every time they did this. Wrong.
Yes.
And changing the name of Pat Buchanan to Patty Buke Buke. And
I'm not done saying your name. Yeah,
that's right. Jack Domundo.
I didn't even know at the time that was based off of a real show. Because like I said, I was under the age of 80 back in the early 90s. So I didn't catch the real McLaughlin Group very often.
But that's such brilliant comedy to find something there. And to be able to do it multiple times. I think they did it 4 or 5 times.
Yeah, they did. They had different iterations of the McLaughlin Group. They even did it as a cold open one time. It got so popular. Yeah.
And then, of course, the death knell for any kind of sketch like this is when the actual person comes in. So John McLaughlin walks into the sketch and takes over for Dana.
Yeah, that's like the life cycle of a recurring sketch. Is
it's over after that.
Yeah, it's over. McLaughlin Group was something that I found out when he was on Fly on the Wall. He had talked about the John McLaughlin was his thing. Dana gave Smigel credit for that, and that blew my mind. When we did the Dana Carvey episode for the SNL Hall of Fame, Darren Patterson and I from SNL Nerds, we spent a bit of time talking about the McLaughlin Group sketches, and that's the sketch that we played for Dana at the end of the show to highlight Dana. So it's like Dana's performance and a lot of Schmeigel's writing went into such a memorable, wonderful thing. You could go, if you ever go to to 8H to go see the show, as you exit the studio, they have a bunch of pictures on either side in the hallway, and right there, prominent is McLaughlin Group.
Yeah,
they have it framed and everything in that hallway. So that tells me what the show thinks about that sketch too.
Yeah. Then another one that he has a huge part in, and he did talk about this on Fly on the Wall as well, is all the Carson stuff, which was also a favorite of mine as well. I loved the way that Dana portrayed Johnny Carson. Johnny Carson's a favorite of mine, even though I was a little bit young. It's something that I watch the reruns of to this day on things like Pluto TV and Peacock. He's such a giant, such a brilliant talk show host that nobody today can hold a candle to. And they found such a funny way, and Dana and Phil working at their best. Phil is Ed McMahon, and it's just such a great thing even to go back and watch. And I found it funny. Smigel sounded a little distraught on how upset Johnny was, which I never knew. I always assumed it was the Carcinio one, and he said that it was not. It was the one where they made it sound like he was senile and not with it. But he liked the Carcinio one because it made fun of both him and Arsenio.
Now, some of you at home might not understand some of this lingo, which earlier in the day our staff compiled from the streets. Now, when I said my guests were in my house, what I meant was in the studio.
Yes.
That is some weird, wild stuff. Now, according to this, your actual house is called a crib. But a baby crib is not necessarily called a house. I did not know that.
Not a house. Not a house, no, sir.
If you're too young to remember all this, kids, there was only one talk show host, and Carson crushed anybody who came in his way. And Arsenio in the late 80s, Arsenio Hall kind of almost overtook him and definitely took all the younger viewers. And that's kind of when he knew he was going to hang it up after 30 years. So, but they found a funny way to portray it. And I always enjoyed those.
Yeah, with the Carson thing, I think it's an example to me of how Smigel can find a kernel of something and just flesh it out with wonderful parody. So in Carson's case, it was that Carson would set up the bit. He would tell the audience, all right, well, here's what we're going to do.
That's right.
We are going to take a camera outside and talk to people on the street, and this is going to be why. So he would just walk the audience through some of these bits, and Smigel said that they found that so hilarious. So that was almost the little kernel of something that Carson really did, and they just turned that into this great character and these great sketches.
Probably my favorite, talking about these kernels that you're talking about, is it was one of the anniversary shows. They were parodying the anniversary show, and they're cutting to Carson in older times. So they have Joan Embry come out, which was one of the animal people, and the animals in Carson always, there was something, either it was intimidating or it would pee on him or something. So they have this whole part of that, flashback where he's wearing his 70s clothes as opposed to his 90s clothes, where the animal is just, the stream is coming down his suit. And then they cut to another flashback, which was a real thing, of Johnny and Burt Reynolds and Dom DeLuise. And there were times where they would come out and spread whipped cream on each other, and it just became this whole kids food fight thing that Carson would do occasionally with his friends. But their version on SNL was Burt Reynolds, Phil as Burt Reynolds' pants are pulled down, and Farley as Dom DeLuise comes out and he starts peeing his pants, and but to find something that was real from the Carson show and turn it into almost a deep cut at the time that they were doing something from 15 or 16 years earlier. And it's just brilliant.
Even when I was a kid watching those, I loved when I would see a Johnny Carson sketch, and he and Dana teamed up on the Regis Philbin stuff too, which I thought was great. And I think that was one where maybe he had Phil Hartman in mind to play Regis. I think Smigel actually cast Phil Hartman initially in the first Regis Philbin sketch that he wrote, and then somebody pointed out to Smigel that Dana actually he has a stripe, maybe looks more similar, and Schmeigel was like, oh, that's right. I think he just picked Phil as like the elder statesman, relatively speaking, to the rest of the cast to play Regis. But a lot of that dialogue, he helped Dana with the impression a little bit. A lot of that's Robert Schmeigel's brainchild. It's just wonderful stuff.
Anyway.
Rich! Yeah.
We arrive in Riyadh to check into the Ackman Hotel where we had reservations.
Oh, Reach, here we go now.
And we get there, and what happens?
Right.
Sorry, President Bush has the entire hotel! The entire hotel!
He's the president,
She's
Rich.
interrupting me!
He's the president.
You're just hyper because Harry Hamlin's gonna be on tomorrow!
Rich! Oh!
Watch out, Gifford!
I love you, Frank. I do.
All right. There she is with Gifford!
And Jan as Kathy Lee was wonderful. And they only did that a few times, too.
Right.
Most people probably think of the Daryl Hammond version with Kelly Ripa and Amy Poehler as Kelly Ripa. But yeah, they are very, very funny. I'm out of control. Can you believe this, kids? Can you believe this? And he'd go into these stories about, his slights at a restaurant or at a show, and how he wasn't considered an A-lister.
So those were some highlights. Actually, I should mention one thing I wanted to mention, because Smigel himself actually cites this as his favorite thing that he wrote was the Cluckin' Chicken fake ad that was from season 18 in 93. It's this fake ad for a chicken restaurant where it's this talking cartoon chicken talking about how he's made, basically, and how delicious he is.
Then the pieces of me get flame broiled. Hear that sizzle? That's me! 550 degrees. Good thing I'm dead, or yeah-wee! Then I'm seasoned just right and ready to go. Hey, I'm good.
So it's this cartoonish voice, and it's like kind of this fun commercial.
Sandler.
But then, is that Sandler who does the voice?
Yes.
Okay, so it's Adam Sandler voicing this chicken, but then some of the visuals are, again, like satire and parody that Schmeigel's known for. He cuts to real kind of graphic visuals of chickens being prepared and slaughtered, and amidst this cartoonish chicken commercial, and Schmeigel does cite that as his favorite thing that he wrote.
Yes, and this is in an era where the commercial pre-tapes were kind of predominant on the show, and something that I kind of miss in this day and age. We don't get enough of. And one of the funniest commercials of the era for sure, and something that's, I think, is still played, that you can still easily find. And Phil Hartman as the dad in the commercial, in the live action part of the commercial. Just very, very funny stuff.
There's a reason why that's his favorite thing that he wrote on SNL.
Can I bring up a couple more for you before we move on? Yeah. Just because these kind of blew my mind too. He did the Perot Stockdale cold open.
Oh my gosh.
Yes.
Like one of the best cold opens ever.
This is something that I still quote. James Stockdale being driven out to the woods because he did such a bad job in the vice presidential debate, and Ross Perot is driving him out to leave him for dead. And I still say to this day, who am I? Why am I here? So yes, he wrote that, and possibly the greatest cold open of all time. We've discussed this ad infinitum on Saturday Night Network. The Not Gonna Phone It In Tonight was Robert Smigel. That's so amazing. And then one more cold open, and then we'll move on from this. The drill sergeant, Phil's drill sergeant, where he, being this really tough guy in the army and going up to these soldiers, and instead of calling them derogatory names, he's saying things like
Mr. Eyes in Face Man,
or Mr. Doggy. And brilliant work. So Most of these things without music can still be found on YouTube. Please go find them.
Yeah, go find all of these. And my mind is just blown. Again, thank you.
Mine was too.
Yeah, we're going to have to give Robert Smigel a credit on this episode because as a researcher or something, because he's helped so much with this. That's awesome.
In 93, he does move on to become head writer of Conan O'Brien. So he leaves the show. And if that's where you left it, if this was his career and we were done talking, he'd still be in the Hall of Fame. That's 7 or 8 years of absolute brilliance as a writer. But wait, there is more.
There is more. I wanted to ask you, though, before we get there, you referenced the Dana Carvey show, which had about 8 episodes in 96. I've never talked to you about the Dana Carvey show. Did you watch it? What did you think?
Absolutely watched it. Absolutely loved it. There was a brilliant documentary on Hulu. I don't know if it's still there. I know the episodes are no longer on Hulu, sadly, but they were there until a couple of years ago where you could go back and watch these 8 Dana Carvey episodes. Yes, it was very, very funny. It got put in bad time slots. People weren't getting all the humor. They made a couple of bad decisions as far as sketches. I think there was a Clinton milking incident. I don't remember the whole thing.
They led off with that sketch. So it was Clinton in the Oval Office. And so he was trying to essentially prove to America how nurturing he was. And so he was milking. He had udders attached to him. And I think he was like feeding, I don't know if it was cows or babies or something, but it was.
I think it was cows.
It was cows.
I don't remember. I blocked that out.
And so that was the very first sketch of the Dana Carvey show. So that was basically Smigel and Carvey and the rest of the staff saying, "Here's what our show is," like right up top.
But once you get past that, there is so much good stuff from not only Smigel, but we have Steve Carell, we have Stephen Colbert.
I mean, Louis C.K.
was a part of that as well. He got a lot of guest star. I think Jan Hooks was on it a couple of times. Once they got past that very bumpy beginning, there was a lot of good stuff there, but I think the damage was done and it just did not transfer. There's a reason they're called the not ready for primetime players, right? So
yeah, there you go. I think it aired after Home Improvement or one of those those shows on ABC that was kind of a weird fit.
Yeah.
That's hilarious. So he, after his first SNL stint, he's the head writer on Conan. He wrote on the Dana Carvey show, and that's a wrap. Robert Smigel, SNL Hall of Famer. Let's send him his plaque, right? Well, he's responsible for one of the more iconic segments, maybe in SNL history for sure, in that era of SNL, in TV Funhouse. So a little over 100 segments of TV Funhouse ran on SNL for a long time, 1996 through 2008. Then there was that one-off in 2011. Man, I would get excited when the TV Funhouse jingle would start.
Come back here with Mark.
Like, it's such a visceral memory for me. That jingle would start, the dog would tear the host's picture, Lorne would say, "Come back with my show," and I would just brace myself for what I'm about to see from Robert Smigel. So just tell me your memories and thoughts of TV Funhouse.
If anything else came out of the Dana Carvey show, it was TV Funhouse, because he debuted probably the most famous recurring TV Funhouse, the Ambiguously Gay Duo.
The ambiguously gay duo, the ambiguously gay duo. They are taking on evil, come what may. They are fighting all crime to save the day. They're extremely close in an ambiguous way. They're ambiguously gay. They're ambiguously gay. The ambiguously gay duo.
The ambiguously gay duo.
With the voices of Stephen Colbert and Steve Carell. And yeah, this was such, same as you, it was such a visceral reaction. It tapped into, I'm a little bit older than you, maybe a few years, and it's the Gen X cartoons that he found a way to turn into these brilliant parodies, from the Yogi Bear stuff, the Hanna-Barbera stuff, to Disney, to the Mr. T show, which he told me was his favorite. I would say it's up there for me too, because it's one of those ridiculous 80s cartoons that nobody could believe this person was getting their own cartoon.
Yeah.
And if you don't remember it, it's, it's just Mr. T, Tracy Morgan doing the voice very well at the beginning of his tenure. And, just keeps quoting things like, stay in school, drink your milk. They're fighting crime.
Yeah. And he's looking for work too. So
yes,
he's like, oh, that's work. That's so
right.
I love those. That's interesting. Smigel cites that one as possibly his favorite TV funhouse.
But my favorites were always the fun with real audio.
Yes.
I think there was such a great take on different. The one that always sticks out to me is the Tom Snyder with Dolly Parton.
Yeah.
And it was basically, just as it says, fun with real audio. It was real audio from either, something in a politician's life. In this case, it was the late night show with Tom Snyder interviewing Dolly Parton. And he tended to get very into his guests. And so they turned it into this whole stalking thing where he's just kind of following her around town. And meanwhile, the real audio is playing. And if it was at the time, it was just something that they were sitting in a studio. They've turned this into him going to her house, standing in her bedroom, standing outside her window, and eventually, him getting arrested. And they did this probably 7 or 8 times. They did one with Clinton and Dole. So those were my favorites as far as the TV Funhouse.
Yeah, as far as the recurring ones, I would have to agree. I think the fun with real audio was my favorite. The Bill Clinton State of the Union, which was an early one, that might have been the first fun with real audio that they did. So it's Bill Clinton in cartoon form giving a State of the Union with the real State of the Union playing as the audio. And then it descends into because he had just beaten Bob Dole and Ross Perot in the election. This was in 96. So it goes from Bill Clinton giving the State of the Union address to Bob Dole giving the address to his wife in the living room.
That's
to
right.
Ross Perot giving the address, I think, in an insane asylum. And then all of a sudden a big bunny enters the picture and then madness happens. But those fun with real audio segments were just, I think, probably always my favorite, along with the ex-presidents.
Yeah.
The other recurring one was as you mentioned, the ambiguously gay duo. So yeah, those were ones that were recurring that just really left an imprint on SNL viewers at that time.
He also mentioned Shazang, which was, I believe, a one-off, but was based on a ridiculous 70s cartoon called Shazam. And it was a genie that was all powerful. And in the Smigel version of it, he's tearing this bad guy apart and, cutting him into sandwiches. And the kids that were so grateful that this genie had intervened are just terrified that this genie has turned homicidal and kind of very cruel. Do you remember that one?
Yeah, I do remember that one. That's just another example of Schmeigel's chops as far as parody goes. He could take something. I remember the Speed Racer parody, but it was George Clooney in kind of a Speed Racer cartoon. And there was also Scooby-Doo. You saw Scooby-Doo types of cartoons in there. So yeah, gosh, Smigel was just amazing at satire and parody, and these TV Funhouse were just another example.
And the one that people will probably remember is all the Christmas ones. Mm-hmm. And he did 3 of note, and 2 of them were in the old Rankin Bass format, the Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer kind of animation, the stop motion animation. And he did Christmas Time for the Jews, and he did The Narrator That Ruins Christmas, which was right after 9/11, and kind of sticks in my mind because it was the first Christmas after all of that terribleness, and the snowman narrator from Rudolph just kind of has given up on life and stops narrating, and the kids can't believe it. They're watching TV, and he has to be talked into going back and doing his job.
Santa? Right this way, Mr. Claus.
Hey, what the
That's all right. Sam, I understand this is a difficult time, but telling the story of Rudolph is just what you should be doing. You should bring happiness to the children every year.
Santa, please. I don't think it's appropriate.
It's not about you, douchebag.
Yeah, that was great. Christmas Time for the Jews, as you mentioned, that was just it was a joyful piece, which was an interesting, I mean, all these TV Funhouse segments were joyful in a different way, but this had the most heart, I think, out of almost any TV Funhouse that I can remember. It was an all-time great episode. Like, for me, if we were to talk about inducting episodes into the SNL Hall of Fame, this was the Jack Black Christmas episode in 2005. Famous, of course, for Lazy Sunday. That's when Lazy Sunday ran on the show, but also Christmas Time for the Jews. And it was the stop motion animation. It kind of gave it a different feel than a lot of the other TV Funhouses. But to me, that just had so much heart. And it's just like a feel good piece.
Oh, absolutely. And to get Darlene Love to do it as well.
I know.
That's incredible.
Some of the other one-offs, there, of course, the controversial Conspiracy Theory Rock. That was from March of 1998. It was a Schoolhouse Rock parody, basically about how companies control the media. So he had all these examples, including NBC. He didn't leave NBC out of this. He had an animation of a peacock or something. And Lorne actually pulled this from future airings. You can find it on one of the DVDs. You might have it on one of the DVDs that you have. But Lorne said that he didn't think it was funny, but I'm sure he felt some pressure from from NBC to pull this one.
Yeah, that I remember, and it definitely was controversial at the time. The other one that sticks out, it was always amazing, the animation in these, how close they got to whatever character. The Disney ones always cracked me up. The going into the Disney vault. You know, they used to do those commercials all the time. You have to buy this VHS tape in the next 24 hours, or it's going into the Disney vault, and they bring the kids into the vault, and there's Walt Disney's head. and Mickey's explaining that, you know, we don't talk about the bad stuff that Walt did. You know,
right?
That always cracked me up.
Yeah, Schmeigel's never afraid to explore some of the nefarious things, like call truth to power in a lot of ways, even if it was a network that he was working for, or Disney, or, you know, some of those corporations. Smigel wasn't really afraid to call truth to power in funny ways, like not even in angry ways, just in funny ways. One that sticks out to me is the life of a catchphrase, which was Lorne, when we actually saw Lorne in cartoon form.
Many of you write in and say, "Dear Lorne, you're a genius. Thank you." But then some of you write, "Why do you run so much into the ground? I'm so sick of the same damn catchphrases every week." Well, the fact is, we come up with millions of exciting, hot catchphrases every day. But once an audience likes a catchphrase, it doesn't always accept a new one. Here's a demonstration.
Basically, he shows how John Lovitz's "yeah, that's the ticket" became popular as a catchphrase and then fizzled out. Gosh, that was just brilliant. It's so fun to see Lorne depicted that way, and it ends with the hot new catchphrase being, "Well, isn't that special?" Yeah,
and,
so that was
Lovitz
one of my
on a distant planet with all the aliens who just found out about, yeah, that's the ticket, so they're all into him.
Yeah. So, gosh, this whole episode could have been dedicated to TV Funhouse, and it would have been a great example of why Robert Smigel deserves at least strong consideration. I probably think a lock for the Hall of Fame. But if we just had TV Funhouse as the examples, we could sit here and make a strong case. Oh my gosh.
Yeah, I mean, this is one of the most unique arcs in the history of the show. Writers have come and gone. Franken and Davis left for a long time and came back, but to have these two very distinct eras that he was a major part of, where he was writing in one and then making these pre-tapes in the other, it's just brilliant. We would be remiss to not mention one of the other sketches that he was obviously a huge part of, and he was actually in the Superfans.
Superfans.
Yeah.
Yes. As a Bears fan, how could I forget?
Those were so great.
Okay, by my watch, we're about 13 minutes from game time. As you're, I'm sure, aware, the Bears are getting ready for their big playoff against the New York Giants. The Bears are 7-point underdogs, but don't count them out. Now let's go around the room for some predictions. Pat?
The Bears, 62-3.
Okay, Todd?
Bears, 79 zip.
Oh, really? You don't think that the Giants will score?
No, I do not. The Bears' defense is like a wall. You can't go through them.
All right, how about you, Carl?
I say Bears 52-14.
Oh, what? Come on!
I'm sorry. I got to give the Giants credit. I think they'll give the Bears a game.
They did get a little repetitive, but they found a way to make them really, really funny with these four guys sitting around talking about the Bears and doubles. The Thanksgiving one always sticks out to me with Macaulay Culkin.
Yes, Macaulay Culkin and Kieran Culkin making a brief appearance. When they had Michael Jordan on for his episode, he was on the Superfans. I don't know if that's why I'm a Bears fan, now that I think about it.
That's interesting.
That was around the time my fandom started. I think those sketches started airing like in early 91. I think it's because they were playing the Giants in the playoffs in New York. I think, and Smigel, of course, being a Chicago guy, got inspired, and that was sort of his brainchild. And one of the times where there were a few times he appeared on screen in sketches, but that was probably his most famous on-screen appearance.
He also did Hub's Gyros, which you like the juice.
Yes.
And that was his because of a restaurant in Chicago, kind of like the Cheeseburger. It was a real restaurant where these starving artists would go and eat, and there was just somebody really funny behind the counter, and he was in that sketch as well, the two times they did that.
To speak to his longevity, and then specifically with the TV Funhouse segments, so I watched SNL all through high school, which for me was 96 to 2000. That's when I was in high school. Then in college, I kind of fell away a little bit because I kind of had other priorities. I was working, I was going out with my friends, and I would kind of catch sketches here and there. I think there was a time where you could download sketches off of like LimeWire or Kazaa or something, and I would watch a lot of sketches that way. But then I came back to SNL probably around 04, 05, and TV Funhouse was still part of the show. So when I was in high school when TV Funhouse started, left the show for a bit, and then when I came back to it, I turn on the show, and it's still TV Funhouse, the sexual harassment in You video with Tom Brady. That was a TV Funhouse. So, of course, we mentioned Christmas Time for the Jews in that era in 2005. So that just blew my mind that this segment was still part of the show from when I started watching in high school through when I watched less in college to when I picked it back up. Yeah, TV Funhouse was on for so long, still producing quality segments.
It's probably the longest running pre-tape as far as something that is done not week to week, but a decent amount every season. Mm-hmm. Lonely Island was on about 7 years. If you go way back, Albert Brooks, Gary Weiss. I mean, Schiller was in and out for years, but it was never a consecutive. But yeah, you're right. It was this over a decade of dominance with TV Funhouse. And one of the few times, especially in post-original era, where the writer gets credit in the opening credits. It was always a cartoon by Robert Smigel. Mm-hmm. So that was a big, big deal. And to see, when you saw that in the opening credits, you knew at least one thing was going to be funny. Even if the season wasn't going great, you'd have a TV Funhouse to look forward to.
And it's kind of funny because we've talked about all these great sketches, all the TV Funhouse stuff that he did, but his most famous creation was not for SNL. And we probably, just for a second, should bring up, if people don't know, of course, Robert Smigel is Triumph the Insult comic dog.
That's
and
right.
Arguably his most famous creations. Are you a fan of that character?
Absolutely. Loved Conan. Loved watching Conan. The SNL connections probably brought me to that show. And Smigel's fingerprints being all over the show, especially in the early years, was such a big deal. And Triumph was great. Triumph's still great.
Still great, yeah.
Smigel got arrested last year at the Capitol doing Triumph, trying to recreate January 6th. So
yeah, that's right. And then it's just such great commentary on celebrity culture and pop culture in general. And he disarms people. What's brilliant about Smigel is he'll make commentary about celebrities often to their faces, but disarm them because it's a puppet.
Right.
Like how can you get genuinely mad at a puppet in front of your face, right? Like
that's right. I feel like, and I feel like he would take this as a compliment. It's almost the puppet version of Don Rickles.
Yeah.
That if you were around Triumph, you'd be like, make fun of me. Hurry, come over here. I want to hear
in the spirit of those Borscht Belt comics from the old days, which I consider Don Rickles to be a part of that. That's a great comparison. It is like the puppet version of Don Rickles. And that's just, again, Smigel wrote a lot of smart, biting satire, and that's part of his like distinct comedic voice to me. And then there we see it in puppet form.
The guy has been so dominant in comedic culture for 35 years beyond SNL. It's a no-brainer to me that he deserves to be brought in.
Yeah, so let's make this official, Bill. So now's your time to sum up the case. So why do you think Robert Smigel should be strongly considered for the SNL Hall of Fame?
Well, he has a lasting legacy for the show. From everything we just talked about, two completely different eras, generations of the show, two completely different writing styles, from writing these brilliant sketches that we've brought up tonight to making these wonderful cartoons of TV Funhouse for over a decade. And they all stand the test of time. If you've laughed at something about SNL over the last 25 or 30 years, chances are Smigel had his hands on it. So that to me, and it's his lasting legacy, and then what he's gone on to do afterwards as well. Would be remiss not to mention the Night of Too Many Stars, which he created for his autistic son, and they raise millions and millions of dollars for autism, and he gets all these brilliant stars. So just a great guy, and now my new BFF. So I think he has to be on the, I don't know if you'd put him on the Mount Rushmore of writers in the history of SNL, but he's damn close if he's not.
So there's that. Thanks so much to Bill Kenney. Great conversation there with Thomas Senna. And I learned some stuff that I did not know. So that's pretty cool when you can listen to a podcast, be entertained, and learn. Let's head right on over to the sketch that was selected for Robert Smigel. This is a great one. This is President Reagan Mastermind, it's called. So let's give that a listen now.
And finally, Mr. President, about the Iran-Nicaraguan connection. Some may wonder which was worse, your knowing or your not knowing.
Well, all I can say is I didn't know. And well, we're trying to find out what happened because none of us know.
Well, thank you, Mr. President.
Well, I hope I've answered your questions as best I could, given the very little that I know. Goodbye, and God bless you.
Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you very much.
Okay, get back in here. All right, let's get down to business. I'm only going to go through this once, so it's essential that you pay attention. 1, Casey.
Yes, sir.
You'll spearhead our new operation to fund the Contras. The C-5As with the tow missiles and grenade launchers will leave for South Africa at 0800 hours. I want you to supervise the loading. 2, Regan.
Yes, sir.
Well, I'm afraid you're going to have to resign. But first you'll make a public statement supporting me, which I wrote myself. It's over there on the word processor. Just key in and press file. The code name is Oh, all right, I'll do it for you. Now, any questions? Casper.
Hey, Mr. President, you're going so fast. There's still a lot about the Iran-Nicaragua operation I just don't understand.
And you don't need to understand. I'm the president. Only I need to understand. Is that clear?
Yes, sir.
All right. Carlucci, you're new. Here's how we do things. The red countries are the countries we sell arms to. The green countries are the countries where we wash our money. The blue countries are the...
Excuse me, Mr. President, sir?
Yes?
It's your 11:30 photo opportunity, the little girl who sold the most Girl Scout cookies.
Damn! Okay, let's get it over with. Everybody out. Come on, move. This is the part of the job I hate.
Well, hello, little girl. What's your name?
Lisa Myers.
Well, Lisa, if you're that good a sales lady, maybe I could use you up on Capitol Hill. Well, it was nice meeting you.
Come on, Lisa. Come on.
Bye-bye.
Come on.
Back to work! Afghanistan needs more money. We've got 65.2 million tucked away in Zurich. Now, if we hold it there for another 30 days at 7.28% interest, that's roughly $400,000.
397,200.
And 85. I know, don't waste my time. But if we take out only 20 million, we'll lose roughly, let's see, that's
121,800.
And 16. Thank you so much. Yes.
Mr. President, it's Mr. Karan Hassan Fassan.
Put him on the speaker.
Rana, tu me se bo khalata lema kurzim.
Kariz Masushari, Allah Khamara Gazi.
Taray mosun shlo este marato. Tu maf metaja.
Oh, Bukarakanagasha. Makalana ho, Makachani he.
Makachani ho,
Basakhlem. Well, gentlemen, I just concluded a very lucrative deal with the Iraqis.
Mr. President, it just occurred to me. What if something should happen to you? You're the only one who knows what's going on.
And that's the way it's going to stay. To quote Montesquieu, power without knowledge is power lost.
Mr. President.
Yes.
It's Jimmy Stewart.
Oh, damn now.
He says he's had an appointment with you for 2 months now.
All right. Let's get on with it. Everybody out. Hello, Jimmy.
Yeah, well, hi, Dutch. How are you? Yeah. Oh, I'm sorry, Mr. President. You know, I have the hardest time getting used to that.
Well, we sure had great times back in Hollywood.
You can say that again, Dutch. We certainly did, yeah.
Well, it was good seeing you, Jimmy.
Well, what are you talking about? I just got here, for crying out loud.
Well, I know, but I have, a meeting.
Well, that's just great. I'll just stick around. That's it. I'll just stick around, and it'll be what educational for me. Yeah.
Well, Jimmy, I'm sorry you can't stay.
Oh, come on, Dutch.
Jimmy, don't make me have to kill you.
Kill me? What do you kill me? What sense? When is it a crime to visit your friend? I mean, what are you going to do? Have your Secret Service boys come in here and just blow me away?
No.
You've changed, Dutch. You've really changed.
Oh, Jimmy, please try to understand.
Crying out loud. You've turned into a real jerk. You know that? You son of a...
Please, Jimmy, please. Okay, good. All right. Now listen, I want to discuss the cover-up. Here's my plan. The NSC Review Board will buy Tower, bribe him, just flat out buy him. Now, we'll dose Muskie with mood-altering drugs. By the time Muskie knows what day it is, the '88 elections will be over. So, if we channel the 72 million through Ivan Boesky, we'll have enough left over for Syria and South Yemen. Now, the next point on the agenda is Ed, Donald, hello? Well, just me again. Great. Well, I've been doing it this way for 6 years. Why should it change now? 3 a.m. Banks will be opening in Zurich right about now. Guten Tag, Herr Schwarzwälder. Wie geht's, was Wagenlogers?
That's fantastic. That is the case for Robert Smigel. I hope you enjoyed yourself this week. I really want to thank Bill Kenney, one of the SNL Superfans over on the Saturday Night Network. Check out all their work at Saturday Night Network, and check out our work while you're at it. You know, we got some good work over here too. But that's what I got for you this week. So enjoy yourselves, be well, and do me a favor on your way out as you walk past the Weekend Update exhibit. Turn out the lights, because the SNL Hall of Fame is now closed.
Thanks for listening to the SNL Hall of Fame podcast. Make sure to rate, review, share, and subscribe to the show wherever you get your podcasts. Follow us on social media at SNL HOF. This is Doug Denant saying, see you next week.
To podcasts and such.